Then you have to get your label approved. Then you have to get your trademarks approved. Then let's say that you want to sell your alcohol in Georgia. Well, the license for Georgia is $8,000 just to get your license to sell alcohol. That's just one state. You know, for New York, I think it's $25,000. You know, and so as you know, get these revenue licenses to sell, you're having to pay these states these, you know, expensive licensing, you know, license fees. Then on top of that, you have to, you know, have a production facility. And, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And so, you know, so when you talk about becoming legal, that's one of the advantages. Like if you become part of our proprietary blend family, then what happens is you fall under our licenses, you fall under our distribution network, you fall, you know, under all of our state licenses. So you're not having to pay all of these separate fees that, you know, they tell you in the industry that it takes $2 to $3 million to just launch a brand, to just get it legal, you know, in all the different states. And that is true. You know, there's a lot of tastings and product development and, you know, just a lot of processes that you have to go through in order to just make a liquor legal. You know, even here in North Carolina, we keep running into barriers for North Carolina to sell it here. So we're sold in, you know, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama. Why aren't we sold in North Carolina? Well, it's because North Carolina makes it almost impossible for an alcohol that's not made in the state to become legal in the state to sell, or at least that's what we found. We have found a huge barrier. And so, you know, so it just really can get, you know, cumbersome. We're in discussions right now for New York. We're expanding into California. You know, we are, you know, very blessed that to be a young brand, to have such support from some really good, you know, distributors like United Johnson Brothers and Southern Glacier. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it also seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I have friends that are club owners, but it seems to me that North Carolina is also, to some degree, and I might get myself in trouble for saying this, but somewhat repressive in some of their laws with even just alcohol in general, because I know that I've had friends, even like the hotel bars, but, you know, they oftentimes will have ABC come by, and if they don't have, I believe it's the right label or the right tag on those kind of things, they wind up having to dump them because they're not correctly identified. So I know there have been a couple of jazz clubs and other kinds of clubs in the area of Durham, and I think some even in Raleigh, they got into trouble for that because, like I said, you know, there's no telling when ABC may pop in on you, and it can be something that's that big as a hotel.
I mean, and the other part, too, is that there is a pay-to-play. I mean, I was actually on the phone with a vice president of a major professional arena here in North Carolina, specifically in Raleigh, and of a professional team. And he said, I mean, we actually have it recorded, and he said, you know, this isn't pay to play, but we are going to have this discussion either above the table or below the table. And he said, if you don't do a sponsorship, your alcohol doesn't get placed in this arena. And I said, well, that sounds a lot like pay to play to me. Yeah. And he says, well, it's, you know, he said, well, that is what we call sponsorship. And he said, you know, and I was like, I said, well, as a young company, I said, well, do you allow product placement to, you know, to cover some of that fee of sponsorship? And he was like, absolutely not. And I said, well, what is the fee? What is the sponsorship fee start at? He said $50,000 cash. And, you know, and so immediately I sent the conversation over to a friend of mine who is an attorney, and he said, that's pay to play, Naomie. And so, you know, but you have almost the system that says if you don't have money, then you're not going to have access to these venues. And so it closes the door to a lot of, you know, small minority female-owned or just small businesses in general. Like, who has $50,000 to just write over to a sponsorship, And so, but yet, it's something that North Carolina turns its head to. And it shouldn't, that the market should have equal access, period.
And that even comes back to one of the things you mentioned earlier, just about the moonshine part of the alcohol and spirits industry. I mean, if you watch TV regularly and you watch any of the sports things, I see tons of beer commercials and maybe one or two wine commercials. But you don't hardly see anything representing the harder side of the spirit industry, the liquors and the things of that nature that are on there on the big stage. I mean, I'm not saying I watch TV all the time, but from what I remember seeing of, like, definitely the big game, the Super Bowl, and some of the others, it seems to be that y'all are already kind of behind the eight ball because the other parts of the spirit industry seem to be way ahead of the game.
Well, yes. I mean, and then the other part, though, is that, when you're a Jack Daniels or when you're a Jim Beam, I mean, you're a billion-dollar company, right? So
right.
Spending $50,000 on a sponsorship is nothing to a brand like when you're making billions of dollars, or Jose Cuervo or, any of those. So, so at what point does small businesses get access to market?
And how are you just coming back? So what are some of the ways? Well, one, I have to say I love your logo because I think that everybody should have a little bit of wicked in their life, whether they want to admit it or not, and that doesn't have anything to do with whether you're a Bible believer or not, because I think that there were some people in the Bible that had a little bit of wicked in their lives as well. So right, I was just wondering, how did you come about into the whole marketing and coming up with the whole theme of Southern Wicked Lemonade? And the other question I was going to ask is, at the time you got it launched, was your grandfather that was involved, was he still alive? And what did he think of you making this a legitimate career? I mean, making like what he had been doing.
Right. So I will tell you that my entire life, I never knew my grandfather to be nothing but godly. He never drank. He never smoked. He never cussed. He never did any of those things. Like, my grandfather did not have any proclivities that I knew of. And so it wasn't until I created this company that all of the skeletons of, my grandfather, story before Christ came about. And so he passed away when I was 18, 17. And so that is 31 years ago. And so, so it was a joy. I was the oldest granddaughter. And we were extremely close. And so, the story came about that I found out that my grandfather his recipe was so popular in eastern North Carolina that he was the first African-American man to pay for a car in cash down in eastern North Carolina because of his recipe. And he started creating moonshine, him and his brother Paul, because my grandmother contracted tuberculosis.
Wow.
As a sharecropper. So, back then, if you had tuberculosis, you would have to go to a sanitarium, and they would treat you for years. Well, for my grandfather, who was a sharecropper who had 5 children, he could not afford for my grandmother to be put in a sanitarium, nor could he afford for, someone to care for his 5 children who were, from like elementary school all the way down to infant, right? So he could not, he couldn't care for them and work the field. So him and his brother Paul started running Shine to supplement their income so that he could, and the money literally went to pay for my grandmother's sanitarium and to have a woman come and help with the kids. And from what I understand, she was in the sanitarium for like 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. Well, when she got out, they started, running Shine so that hopefully, they could actually build a home, and, just, continue to do those kind of things. He bought a car because she was in a sanitarium, I think in Raleigh. He was in Wilson, so he had to have a car to get back and forth. Well, eventually, my Uncle Paul's daughter ended up falling ill, and she ended up dying when she was like 7 or 8 years old suddenly. My grandfather and his brother Paul, being having had a religious background, they believed that God was punishing them for breaking the law for running shy. So on the day of Queen Anne's funeral, they made a promise that if God would allow the rest of their children to live to adulthood, to live, fruitful lives, that they would never shine again. And so they actually kept, they kept their promise. All of their children, believe it or not, grew up to be, men of faith, women of faith, college educated. They all went on to, own homes and, have kids in college. And I mean, it was kind of an amazing, to see how they kept their promise to God, but how God kept their promise to them. So, So with Southern Wicked Lemonade, the way the brand came about is, so if you look at our logo, you're going to see a woman in the middle of the tree. And it stands for the fact that we are the first female moonshine company, in the United States. And so that was very critical to share that part of the journey. You're going to see the little flowers and the fields, and that represented the fields that my grandfather, the background of the story of Tommy. And I think, the other part is our glass actually is imported in from Germany. We don't do China because of the human rights violations of China. And so we wanted to make sure that we, maintain our social consciousness. We get all of our, juices and flavorings and fruits from local farmers first, so we are farm to table, so we support local farmers. Do we take a hit on the profit side for that? Yes, we do. But it's more important for us to be socially conscious and, and support the things that are true to us. And so my partners and I, we feel very, very strongly that we have to support local first. So, so our, the wicked came from the fact that if you try our product, you're not going to taste the alcohol in that product. So what happens is you're drinking, and it seems like you're drinking lemonade until you stand up. And then you find out that the lemonade might have been wicked. So that's kind of how the term came about, as Wicked Lemonade. So, yeah.
Well, see, I can't really talk about that, and I don't want you to go anywhere because I think I heard the bell ring between you. But I might have some other guests, but I definitely want to keep you on the line and everything during the course of the conversation. But I went to a college in Milwaukee that is a beer drinking town. I went to Marquette, which of course is in Milwaukee, very much known for beer. But I became a fan there just to be different of wines and also of a certain kind of liquor. I became a fan of the Tequila Sunrise, and it was exactly that same kind of thing. It was exactly that same kind of thing that you would have that drink, and it went down tasting a little bit like orange juice, but after a few of them, you might be sitting there going like, that was not orange juice.
Right, exactly.
Dean, I think I heard the bell ring, so I think we got some other guests calling in. I don't want Naomie to go anywhere, so stay on the line. I'm going to tie all these conversations together. I don't even know who I've all got today, so this ought to be a real interesting tapestry that I try to pull together. But, Dean, who we got?
Well, we got Jamel Lynch from Harlem Brewery. We're going to get him in just 1 second.
Are you looking to make your next event sizzle? Then you want to get in touch with Lee Entertainment. Mark Lee, the founder of Lee Entertainment, has worked with such notable festivals as the Art of Cool, the National Black Theater Festival, the Bull Durham Blues Festival, and the Durham Centerfest, as well as the Festival of the Eno, and it definitely can provide you with some great entertainers as well as help you make your event sizzle if you're looking forward to trying to have an event in your town. Mark Lee is willing to travel anywhere in this country to make your event sizzle and has entertainers that are also willing to travel as well. So if you're looking for quality entertainment, definitely get in touch at bluesradio@gmail.com.
Mr. Lynch, welcome to Straight Talk with Dean and Mark.
And none of my entertainers will charge you $50,000. You'll be glad to know that, Naomie.
Oh, awesome.
might charge you something else, but they will not charge you that much. Jamel, are you on the line with me?
Good evening. This is Jamel joining.
Hey, Jamel, I'm glad that you're